There are big developments tonight with regard to the Russia investigation. We now know that the FBI determined that Attorney General Jeff Sessions did nothing wrong with regard to the meetings that he had with the Russian ambassador. They said they were routine. They came to that conclusion on March 7th of this year, just 5 days after the AG recused himself from the investigation. So that's interesting timing, isn't it? And it raises new questions about why Jeff Sessions felt that he needed to recuse himself at all. We are also learning tonight that a judge in the Michael Flynn case is no longer on that case. Also tonight, brand new fallout in the media. Late today, CNN was forced to walk back a story about Donald Trump Jr. Earlier this week, Brian Ross and ABC had to do the same. In both stories, it had to do with the timing and the details, which are important in these cases. And it all adds some fuel, you would say, to the fire in the White House argument that this whole thing is not a fair fight for them. So we're going to get to that with the panel in just a moment. But first, Chief Washington Correspondent Ed Henry, live at the White House with what happened today. Good evening, Ed.
Martha, good to see you. What a week it has been, both for hyped-up news stories that are putting President Trump in a negative light that turned out to be bogus, on top of a series of stunning developments that suggest maybe people around the president are not getting a fair shake in the Russia investigation. The latest example tonight, the judge overseeing the case involving retired General Michael Flynn has now recused himself from the matter without explanation. Court documents showing that Judge Rudolph Contreras has now removed himself from the case, but he only did so after Flynn pleaded guilty before Contreras in federal court for lying to the FBI, raising questions about why he did not reveal that beforehand. That move follows several other problems for Special Counsel Robert Mueller this week that have increased concerns about whether the investigation is fair. New tonight, the Wall Street Journal reporting that Mueller's top deputy, Andrew Weissmann, attended Hillary Clinton's election night party, yes, at the Javits Center in New York. Remember, earlier this week, we learned Weissmann had emailed then acting Attorney General Sally Yates early this year when she defied President Trump over his travel ban, writing, quote, "I am so proud and in awe. Thank you so much. All my deepest respects." On top of FBI agent Peter Strzok having to be pulled from Mueller's probe because he had sent text messages to his girlfriend that were anti-Trump and were cheerleading for Hillary Clinton, after Strzok had served as lead agent in the Clinton email probe and got then FBI Director James Comey to shift his summation from saying Clinton was, quote, grossly negligent, which hinted at potential crimes, to the more lenient, extremely careless. Now we learned tonight that despite several media reports earlier this year suggesting Attorney General Jeff Sessions may have been in hot water for not revealing his contacts with the Russian ambassador on an important security clearance form, an FBI email marked March 7th, that date is important, shows that Sessions was under no obligation to reveal those contacts unless he, quote, developed personal relationships with ambassadors from Russia or anywhere else. And here's why that's important. Just a few days earlier, on March 2nd, Jeff Sessions put out a statement saying he was recusing himself from any investigations involving the 2016 campaign because of his role supporting President Trump. Now, the FBI email basically comes in 5 days later saying there was no problem with you failing to disclose this contact with the Russian ambassador on this form. Remember, when Sessions recused himself, that led to the appointment, yes, of Robert Mueller. Martha? Indeed
it did. And Ed, obviously that's something that the president's been upset about since it happened. And it raises, one question is, as the head of the Department of Justice, if he was considering recusing himself based among other things, on these meetings that he had, because that had just been a big story. All of that had come out, and he felt perhaps it didn't look good for him.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't someone at the FBI had said, we're working on this investigation. We don't really see any problem with those meetings, just so you know, before you do this.
Right. Well, in Jeff Sessions' defense and why he recused himself, he would probably argue, because he's talked about this before, that it wasn't just about that form the FBI was evaluating in terms of his security clearance. It was also his testimony before Al Franken and other members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and whether he fully answered truthfully. There was a lot of pressure on Jeff Sessions. But if you're President Trump tonight and you're hearing that 5 days after your Attorney General recused himself, the FBI said, well, that contact with the Russian ambassador really wasn't that big of a deal. The anger that President Trump has had before about the recusal leading to the Mueller appointment, is only going to get a little hotter.
Likely bubbling
Martha?
back up again. Ed, thank you so much. Ed Henry tonight at the White House for us. So joining me now, Karl Rove is former Deputy Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Adrian Elrod served as Strategic Communications Director for the 2016 Clinton presidential campaign. And they both join me now. Lots to chew over tonight. Thanks so much for both of you for being here. You know, with regard to this CNN report, I just want to put up the statement from CNN's Brian Stelter. He said that a CNN spokeswoman says there will be no disciplinary action in this case because unlike Brian Ross, ABC, MK Raju followed the editorial standards process. Multiple sources provided him with the incorrect info. When you put these stories together this week, though, Karl, you know, what do they say about perhaps a propensity to jump to judgment without checking all the numbers and dates, which are crucially important in the story?
Well, it shows the danger of trying to be in a rush to be the first. CNN broke the story. It was then followed by CBS. And ironically enough, the media outlet that corrected them both and blew the whistle on this was the Washington Post, which said, you got the dates wrong. You're conflating this, making it look like it's something that it's not. So it's a problem in the media culture in which we live, where everybody feels like they got to be the first, and particularly if it sounds like it's anti-Trump, then some media outlets are quick to rush through it. But it is an irony. CNN made the mistake, CBS quickly followed, and the people who set him straight were the Washington Post.
Yeah. Brian Ross got a 4-week suspension without pay for his error. In the CNN case, they are not doing that. They feel that their reporter was, you know, that they fixed it in time and that's going to be enough. Adrian, you know, when you look at that and then you look at sort of the larger context of the stories that we've talked so much about this week with regard to the Mueller team and their conflicts and, you know, being like Weissman, for example, who was at the Hillary Clinton party, which turned out to not be much of a party that night, and all of their obvious support for her. Do you see that as a problem, as an American who wants to make sure that this is a fair system?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, first of all, going back to what happened with CNN, it is critically important. There are so many moving parts in this investigation. It's critically important that every media outlet make sure that they check all the boxes, dot the I's, cross the T's before they go up with something. There's a lot of competition out there, and accuracy is incredibly important, especially when we're not even looking at this. At least in my view, it shouldn't always be a Democrat versus a Republican issue. We need to make sure that we as Americans protect ourselves from ever being under the influence of an adversarial government, again, in terms of influencing our electoral process. But secondly, look, I mean, there are a lot of moving parts in this investigation, but you see a lot of Republicans now who praised Mueller when he was initially appointed to oversee this investigation independently, and now people are saying, oh, wait, we don't think he's fair, we think he's too biased, when this is just, again, another example of Republicans trying to create chaos in a situation, given the fact that Mueller is getting closer and closer to determining getting to the bottom of this investigation.
You know, it's not so much about Mueller, Karl, as it is about some of the people that he chose to put on this team. And I think everyone feels that you can feel however you want about candidates and who you support. But it just raises the question, if you feel that strongly, are you the right person for this investigation?
Yeah. Look, I have confidence in Bob Mueller. I'm one of those people who at the beginning complimented the choice. I still have confidence in him. But Peter Strzok, removed in July. We find out about it in December. Bruce Orr, removed in the Justice Department, for having met with Steele, a Brit who was behind the so-called dossier. Andrew Weissman. Of the 15 attorneys that we know are involved in the Mueller investigation, 9 of them are political contributors and all of them are Democrats. So I thought Kim Strassel had a terrific column today in the Wall Street Journal, and her recommendation was that in order to keep confidence, to build confidence in his investigation, Mueller needed to have someone whose job it was to respond quickly to congressional requests for information and make certain that when things like Peter Strzok happen in July, we don't find out about it in November. People in Congress who are involved in these investigations find out it contemporaneously. Can I correct one other thing, though, in the reporting that we've been talking about here? The recusal of Jeff Sessions. It is required by law. In response to the appointment of Robert Kennedy by John Kennedy as his Attorney General and the John Mitchell appointment, the campaign chairman for Richard Nixon. The federal statute requires that if a matter comes up involving the presidential campaign and the attorney general had played a leading role in that campaign as an advisor or participant in the campaign, he must, as a matter of law, recuse himself. And Jeff Sessions, as the first Republican senator to endorse Trump and a senior advisor to President Trump, had no other course of action available to him except to recuse him under the explicit federal statute governing these kinds of situations.
All right. So you feel that he made the right choice, even given the fact that they were about to determine that
these two things were
made
unconnected.
No mistakes in turning out those forms.
Yeah. And I would never, knowing Jeff Sessions like I do, I would absolutely have total confidence in that there was never anything in his behavior that was incorrect.
All right. Adrienne, in terms of the Orr story this week, just as one example of people who are close to this story, does it bother you to learn that he had meetings with Glenn Simpson, that he had meetings with Christopher Steele, who came up with that dossier? Because one of the main questions that remains here is whether or not the dossier is the document that this investigation was hinged upon.
Well, look, there's no proof out there that the dossier is why the FBI opened this investigation in the first place. The FBI opened this investigation because there were clear signs that Russia was possibly colluding with the Trump campaign to alter the election results. And secondly, the dossier, I know there's been a lot of criticism. I understand that. But a lot of the information in the dossier is fact-based. And in my view, if anything in the dossier ultimately leads to determining what actually happened in the election, to get to the bottom of what happened is a good thing.
Karl Rove, Adrienne Elrod, thank you very much, you guys. Great to see you both tonight.
It's time for final thoughts. Listen, liberal whining about the Trump administration is to be expected, but their hypocrisy surrounding the absurdly described independent Russian probe is nothing short of ridiculous. Only in Washington, D.C. would this sham investigation pass as independent. The president, yes, our president, Donald J. Trump, called Washington more of a sewer than a swamp, and with the stench of blatant bias and partisanship surrounding the Russia probe worsening by the day, he's right. Mueller's team could use a good flush. So let's peel back the layers here. Just last week, we discovered Trump derangement syndrome hasn't just infected late-night TV hosts and Hollywood liberals. It's also spread to none other than the very team tasked with investigating Trump associates. Yes, I'm talking about FBI official Peter Strzok, who was finally removed from the investigation after allegedly exchanging anti-Trump texts with an FBI lawyer he was romantically involved with. Oh yeah, they both worked on the Mueller investigation. Oh, but there's more. Andrew Weissman, a prosecutor on Mueller's team, emailed Sally Yates the day Trump would fire her as acting attorney general for refusing to defend one of his executive orders, writing, "I am so proud." Yep, Weissman remains on Mueller's team. Oh, and what about FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe? His wife ran for state senate and received campaign contributions from groups associated with Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, a Clinton ally. The Russia probe was littered with sewer rats from the start. First, James Comey leaks info to the press, all to start an investigation. Then, his good friend and former close colleague Robert Mueller is chosen to direct it. Convenient. And who does he select to help? 4 top lawyers who also happen to be Obama, Hillary, and DNC donors. One of them even worked for the Clinton Foundation. And don't forget, some of these Mueller team rats now hell-bent on destroying President Trump are the same ones who helped get Hillary Clinton off the hook. The woman deleted 33,000 emails. Does that sound like something an innocent woman would do? I think not. This probe isn't an investigation, it's a witch hunt. And it's a witch hunt you, the American taxpayer, are paying for. Yes, that should tick you off. In the first 4.5 months alone, this farce has cost you almost $7 million. That's roughly what the Benghazi investigation totaled in 2 years. And need I remind you, in the Benghazi case, people died. It's rather sad Mueller and team would go to such great lengths just to satisfy pent-up bitterness over an election their precious Hillary couldn't win. Sad. Those are my final thoughts. From LA, God bless, and take care.